Okay, everyone, welcome, welcome. It is officially 11:15 a.m. in Eastern Standard Time, and we are really excited to have you here. We are going to have a large group joining us today, which is wonderful. My name is Julie Harrison. I work at MindManager on the marketing team, and I'm happy to be your host and moderator for today's session with Mr. Michael Deutsch, whose topic for today's session is how to future-proof your projects. So while people are still logging in, I can see a flush of people joining. I just wanted to run over a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, yes, you will receive a recording to this webinar. It'll come to you via email. And Michael will also make his maps available to you that he's going to show in this session. That'll also come to you automatically by email. For today's presentation, it'll be best if you want to watch it on a larger screen. You can click on the screen icon on your control panel. If you can't hear us right now, I'm going to be advising that you log in by telephone, or if you're having other audio issues, try doing telephone and use the audio pin that's showing on your control panel. And throughout the session at any time, feel free to drop into the questions panel. And at the end, we're leaving as much time as possible, hopefully a full 15 minutes, and we'll go through questions and we can ask Michael whatever we would like. So let's get going on our session. What we're talking about today: changing technology, evolving business needs, economic pressures, and global events like the coronavirus are really having a devastating impact on business in general, but especially on our own individual projects too. And getting blindsided by them is really tricky. And I think most of us have been in this boat a little bit, but how do you plan for the unknown? This is what our speaker is going to talk to us about today. As you can see, there's Michael. He's very prepared for the pandemic. He's actually been in quarantine for a fair while. He's an adventure traveler, and he's living in Vietnam right now. If you've been a longtime member of our MindManager community, you're going to recognize Michael's face, his smile that you can see under that mask, and all of the work that he's done for more than a decade. He helped build the product that we have today at MindManager, and more recently he transitioned out of this full-time role to semi-retirement, but we're lucky to still have him as a brand ambassador. And in addition to MindManager, before he joined the company, he had already spent almost a decade of his career consulting with PricewaterhouseCoopers and a few other big names. But as I mentioned, right now he is on semi-retirement. He's an adventure traveler, and in fact he's joining us today from his latest locale, Vietnam, and it's quite late for you, isn't it, Michael? It's really nice to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. And it is, I think you mentioned it earlier for the early people who joined in the session. It's a little after 10:15 here in 10:15 p.m., I should say, here in Hanoi. And I'm very excited to be here. And I can say maybe one of two words I've learned in Vietnamese so far, xin chào, which is hello. I want to say thank you as well to everyone else who is joining us from all over the world. And I especially want to send out this hope that you, your family, and friends, and all the people close to you are well, safe, and healthy. I'm excited to give the presentation. I'm a little tired. I'm a little nervous because I've been locked in the house for I don't know how many months now. It feels like years. But the good news is for us here in Vietnam is they just recently started to lift the quarantine across the country. So we're going to be able to get outside and enjoy some fresh air. Going through quarantine in the city was kind of tough because we were locked in and the police were enforcing everyone to stay home. So it's been nice to see some sunlight. And I'm going to dive into the presentation for everyone. So today I'll be sharing, today I'll be sharing some powerful planning techniques with the focus on planning for not just success, but planning for failure. And I say that because it's going to be planning in a way that helps you identify potential risks and roadblocks, giving you the opportunity to build more robust plans. Maybe a better way to talk about it is more resilient plans, so that you can identify in advance potential risks and roadblocks, giving you a greater chance to mitigate them, increasing your odds and chances at success. And that's what we're here trying to help you with over the next 45 minutes to an hour. The three things I'll be sharing with you. The first one is a magical technique, which is mind mapping. It's a way to visualize ideas and information. The second one is reverse brainstorming. That is a counterintuitive way to run a brainstorming session because you're looking at the opposite of the problem. And I personally love the technique. I find it to be an enjoyable, great, fun way to innovate and create ideas. And the third, what I'm calling here the preemptive postmortem. It's a lot of words, but I have fun playing with those words. The postmortem for a project is when you're at the end of your project and you're looking backwards and saying, what went right, what went wrong, what could we do differently next time? This is a twist on that process, doing it before the project starts, during the planning stages, so that you could brainstorm in a way that helps you visualize and see all the potential issues on your project before it starts, so that you could take remedial action or corrective action, build that right into your plans to avoid as many of those risks as possible. So Julie had shared a bit about my career. The one consistent thread that remains across all of my work as a consultant or working in the software industry, doing marketing, product management, the one consistent thread is project management. In fact, one of the companies I worked for built project management software. And then, as Julie mentioned, I spent over a decade working with the MindManager product, and a very large percentage of our users are using it for planning projects and running projects and brainstorming and problem solving, communicating and running meetings, all part of their project process. So the whole area around project management is something that is near and dear to my heart. And I have really a profound and deep appreciation for project managers, because as my role in product management, I was partnering with the project managers to help build out the software products that we brought to market. So I recognize that it takes a village to bring these projects to life. And the skill set for a project manager goes far beyond what the textbooks would say. It includes things like, beyond being a team leader, being a coach, being a psychologist, a problem solver, a mediator, a cheerleader, a communicator. I mean, the list goes on and on. But today in this presentation, we're going to talk about the soothsayer. So that really is a fun way of saying your ability to predict the future. And this is the first step to greater resiliency. And by resilience, like I mentioned earlier, this is all about your ability to recover from or adjust based on changes or things that go wrong in your project. How quick can you get back up? So the world right now, with this pandemic we're all facing, is the greatest shift in how we work in the history of the planet. I can't think of any event that shut down an entire planet or impacted as many millions and tens of millions of businesses around the globe. So given all of this change, the question remains, how do we move forward? How do we plan with so much unknown? And the fact of the matter is, resiliency is so important now because disruption appears to be, my perspective is, it's the new norm. Beyond shutting down the globe, some of the things that can impact your projects are listed here. Some of the things I've personally faced in my career midway through projects have been dramatic shifts in strategy, budget cuts, and then trying to figure out how to deliver the project with less resources. Technology changes midstream that have us restarting over a project, but still having to maintain a delivery date. Inaccurate time and cost estimates, key staff leaving a company. How do you work around all of these things? And the one thing that's clear is, in today's environment, there is no clarity for what tomorrow is going to look like. Are we going to be working from home? Will there be business travel? How will all of this impact our budgets, our priorities? Will we have lost clients that impact the projects? Or maybe the supply chain is disrupted and you can no longer build the products that you're trying to build. So things are shifting. And the question is, how do we build effective plans with all of this unknown happening all around us? So this is a little pithy quote I found, which originally was attributed to Ben Franklin. I challenge anyone to go find proof of that because I couldn't find any, so I have no idea who said this quote. And it struck me as something I wanted to include in the presentation, and I had it in the original presentation, and I felt like something was wrong as well. The entire time I was looking at it, I included it, and then I shifted it. And I think that the 2020 version of this quote is, by failing to prepare for the unknown, you are preparing to fail. Because in this day and age, it's really, as project managers, as business people, as entrepreneurs, we have to be anticipating the unanticipatable. Did I say that right? We have to be able to see
I
the
think
future.
you did say it right. And I love this, Michael. This is so good. I think this really applies to teachers and educators as well. You know, it's a whole other world, and we don't know what people are going to be, kind of environment people are going to be working in the future. So we have to kind of check that out.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up educators, because I am living in a house here in Hanoi with a teacher. And
are you?
Someone I met through our travels. Yeah, someone I met through our travels, and they were gracious enough to take us in and let us ride out the storm in their home. And I've been side by side with him as he's shifted the way he goes about his business and needs to figure out how to create curriculum and teach classes and keep students engaged, and everything's changing. So the more prepared we can become, the better off we will be in our projects and in our life. I mean, ultimately, that's the point. And the rest of the presentation will be giving you guys some tools that can show you ways to do this more easily. So to dive in, one of the things I wanted to make a point here about looking at the shadow side of planning is, in order to do all that, we have to overcome our planning biases. We have a tendency to underestimate our own work. I know that I do. And then we have a tendency to overestimate the work of others. So it's really tough. In general, I've seen a lot of bias around planning, in that most people, myself included, tend to plan on the optimal basis, the happy path. But really, we need to look at the unhappy path in order to make a more robust and a more resilient plan. So I'm going to invite everyone to just take a deep breath with me and sit back. We're going to explore these two techniques together. And the first one is mind mapping. So mind mapping is something that you could do with a pen and paper or on a whiteboard, or in a bit, I'll share with you a little bit about what you can do with mind mapping with software as well. The process is probably over 1,000 years old. So we've been visualizing information with pictures for a very long time, but the earliest documents that have been found with mind map type diagrams goes back to the age of Aristotle, where a table of contents of Aristotle's book of categories was drawn up as a picture. And then from there, other philosophers and artists have used imagery, pictures that start with a central theme or idea and start to branch out. In fact, literally, there were artworks, this is maybe, it's around 500 years after the Aristotle book, table of contents, that pictures of artworks of trees were actually maintained, and it was like a tree of wisdom, where each branch was a branch of knowledge, and each leaf coming off that branch was a bit of knowledge, including the roots containing information. So we've been using pictures to share information or think through and present concepts for an extremely long time. And you can fast forward to the Renaissance period, great thinkers like Leonardo da Vinci or Einstein. If you look at their notes, they've actually created mind map type diagrams as well. So in the 1970s, a man named Tony Buzan created and formalized the concept of mind mapping. And then about a decade or so later, in the early 90s, MindJet and the company that created MindManager was the first organization to introduce to the world a piece of software that helps you visualize your ideas in an interactive way. So a mind map, now finally, after all that history, the definition of it is it's a drawing or a diagram where you start with a central theme or concept. And from there, you radiate outwards and draw in other key major categories or ideas that are associated to that central idea or theme. And then you can continue to branch out, drawing lines to connect into any one of those categories additional layers of details. So some of the benefits of doing this kind of funky or fun visualization technique, you may be wondering, why am I going to do all that? Well, there's this guy, Chuck Frey, who has been doing for many years a mind mapping software blog. He does a biannual survey where he asks hundreds, if not thousands of users of different mind mapping software applications, what are the key benefits you get from using this type of software? You can see some of the top responses on the screen. For me, I'll share the greatest benefit I've received for using this technique for over a decade. I was going to say a year, I don't know why, but it's been 12 years. I actually started mind mapping when I interviewed for the job at the mind mapping software company. And I was like, what is this thing? But for me, what I've gained out of it for the past decade was greater clarity, greater perspective. See, the process is you're taking things outside of, or that's inside your head. And that could be ideas, it could be information, it could be fears, it could be worries, it could be hope, it could be opportunities, aspirations, inspirations. Whatever you're thinking, you can get it out of your head and into this diagram. You can organize in ways that make sense to you. But what you're doing, the magic of mapping, for me, that I've discovered over the years, is you're freeing up mental space. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I think
And when
that's the real key, is that freedom. You know, it really releases a bit of a mental load.
It does, it does. It's kind of like a computer that you don't have enough RAM to open up another application or something like that. Like your whole system slows down when you have too many apps open. For me, once your mind is clear and you're looking at what used to be in your head, it opens you up to be more creative, to think more critically. You can start solving problems, or you may immediately see the path forward. So people use this for strategic planning, project planning, problem solving, because you no longer have to hold all of that in your head. It's an extremely cathartic process. So again, just to put a picture to this, you start with a central theme, whatever subject you're thinking of, and you start to branch out and look at all the different related ideas to that theme. And then from there, you can continue to break out into greater and greater detail. Now, some of the best practices around mapping would say each one of those topics that you're looking at, those should be a keyword or a phrase. Now, the reasoning behind that, or the rationale, is the fewer words you put down there, the more associations or possibilities that can be created from that point. The more specific you get, the fewer possibilities that can branch off from that point. So an example would be if idea one was really your project XYZ risk branch, where you're going to brainstorm all the potential risks, even specifying project, what did I say, it was XYZ, getting that specific may narrow down the possibilities of what you might brainstorm could be potential risks, as opposed to simply just writing the word risks. And that way you're opened up to think about what are all the risks we might face. And some of those risks might be about the company, not just the project, or the competition, not just the project, or things that are happening with technology or politics or new laws that might come into play. So it really can help you open up. So in this case, less is more, and more sometimes leads to less. Something
Yeah,
else,
I have heard a lot of mind mapping experts really focus on that idea, Michael, that it needs to be,
Mhm.
just like a one word, preferably like just a noun. And I can really see how that works because otherwise, you could be narrowing your focus unnecessarily and, maybe you've got your own assumptions that you're just embedding into your map before you even start brainstorming.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's also why a lot of times people recommend using pictures, images, drawings, sketches, things like that, instead of words as well. Because not only is a picture worth 1,000 words, you can use it to simplify and convey a lot of meaning and tell a story with imagery as well. So that's a best practice or a technique people recommend. And then another example of a best practice around mapping is to I don't know how that word came out, differentiate each of the branches with a different color. So I have a very rainbow-like map here. It's very colorful. An example would be every branch has its own color. Personally, I break that rule all the time. For me, I like to use color more strategically, like traffic lights. So I might have certain topics as red, meaning something's really wrong and I have to pay attention here. I really want to make that stand out. Things that I might code as yellow will be warning or keep an eye on this topic. And then I might just have normal colors or green if I really want to highlight something's a solid, good status, and I don't have to pay too much attention to that area of my diagram. So in this example too, I'm sharing status, so I'm implying I'm using a map to run a project. That's what was happening behind the scenes when I think about when do I use color. If I'm creating a presentation where I want to convey meaning and use common colors that mean something to the audience. So those are a few of the best practices, but like I'm not going to preach any hard rules around mind mapping. For me, the best thing is read a book, read a blog, attend some of these webinars, but do what works for you, because this is a practice that can change your life and your career and your work, and I will never not use it again. It's just that good.
Me too, yeah.
So I've created a more contextual example, and you see here I made a mind map of my presentation about mind mapping. So the central theme here was about mind mapping, and then I brainstormed some things that I might want to cover during the talk. So I just thought, what if I talked about the history of mapping, some of the key benefits, some of the rules or best practices, applications of mapping, things like that. I started to add some imagery behind it because it makes it stand out a little bit more. And then I start to branch in and start filling in some of the details. Like, what is the history of mapping? When did it begin? Who used it? What are some of these names that you might recommend? Things like that, or recognize, not recommend. And then I filled out all the branches and I got everything that was in my head, some of my research, some articles, whatever. I pulled it all together into a map that I could speak to. I can give a presentation with just this map, or I can export this into a variety of formats like a document or a PowerPoint presentation, things like that. So I have the foundations of a body of knowledge after a few minutes of brainstorming and organizing some of my thoughts. I'm going to jump in right now to MindManager and share with you some of the interactivity of using this in a software application. So you can actually see the map as it's moving around. And I'll walk you through some of the capabilities of mapping in the process. So the first point that I wanted to make about this is one of the benefits of using software is you can start out with some templates. Now, MindManager comes with a series of templates. All mapping applications should have some sort of templates. You can create your own to have a consistent process. If you go into the File menu and go into New, you can start any number of blank maps or diagrams using the software. And if you scroll down lower, you see a bunch of folders, and these are really about some of the applications of mapping that we try to inspire people different ways that they can use it. So I mentioned earlier strategic planning, problem solving, facilitating meetings, different types of meetings, whether it's status or brainstorming or problem-solving meetings, things like that. Different ways to manage information in teams, and project management, something familiar with this audience. So if you needed to start a new project or document a charter, build out a new project plan, or create a dashboard to manage and put your arms around all the moving parts and pieces of the project or programs you're working on, here are some starting points for you using a template. In this case, I created this map sort of just brainstorming, what do I want to share today? So that's a little bit about the templates. Now topics, first thing I want to call out is this ability, unlike a drawing which you do by hand, and I'm not only selling mind mapping software, I love to map with a pen and paper as well. I find it to be a cathartic experience, and I like the tactile experience. But some of the issues with it is you can't do the things software can do, which like is open and close a branch or move a topic from one place to another. You can with an eraser, or you can redraw the map, but I find there's a lot of time-saving capabilities in software that weigh it more heavily for doing professional work with it. So the different types of topics, you have the central topic, and then branching off of that are these main topics that are connected with lines. So this is a hierarchical drawing. And then beyond, or you can keep going deeper and deeper and see that you might have another topic, and then that will have children topics. And on this level, we often refer to these as sibling topics to any one topic that's a child. And there's another concept we have in the software called floating topics. And that's something that's not attached to the hierarchy, as you can see here, but you can select them and you can create additional topics beneath them. You can grab them and you can just drag and drop them right into the diagram if you wish. So what you've seen here so far is a little diagram that I can play with. I can open and close things. They have text and they have images. There's a lot more power behind this and a lot more information that you can attach to any topic within your diagram. So the first thing I'll share is you can have icons. So associated with any of these topics, you can have one or more icons. These icons can represent concepts like priority. They're interactive, so you can click them and change, for instance, what priority. Progress, so if you're tracking a task or a to-do item, you can mark something as, not started, 25, 50%, click in, or even mark it complete, and it highlights in green. You can flag things, use arrows. There's a whole set of icons that come with the software application where you can add your own, and you can customize the meaning so that it can adhere to any of your processes. And similar to visual icons, you have the ability to tag with text as well any topic. So you can, I have, for instance, a couple of examples, a Kanban tag, so you can have something that is of the status, it's in your to-do list or something you want to work on or you're working on actively, or you can mark it as done. Or in that case, I think I took it off. And the same below, we have the ability to have different types of tag groups. So in this one topic, I added an opportunity of very high, a risk assessment of medium. So this seems like a pretty good opportunity. Maybe we want to pursue it. Each one of these topics can have any number of links or attachments. So I provided some examples here. I'll just open up an attachment as an example. So we have a side-by-side browser embedded in the application that allows you to see images or documents or hyperlinks into websites or what have you. So you have it all accessible within that topic, as well as links and attachments. You can have notes. So I have a note icon here. If I hover over it, I can have even more information associated with this topic in greater details. So if I click it, it opens up a pane where I can see all the different possibilities of what I can do here. I can add a book if I want. I could write a lot more information. I could highlight, bold, add links, tables, numbered lists, bullets, etc. So there's a lot of possibility there. And beyond the hierarchical relationship of all the topics, you might want to call out additional relationships. So you have the ability to add any other relationships to any other topics in the entire diagram, including floating topics if you so desire. So there's lots of ways to connect information. And this last point here is the ability to add imagery as well. So there's a library of images that come with the software. You can upload your own from files, and you can either have the full image or adjust the size to make it however big you want it, or you can include thumbnails. So you can open up, you can have, for instance, someone might want to map out a website and include all the different paths of the website and screenshots, but not take up all the space of the actual screenshots. So you might want to use a thumbnail instead. So you have a lot of options, and this is only scratching the surface of some of the things you can track, some of the data and metadata along with topics in your diagram. And there's a lot of power behind the engine of MindManager that allows you to do things like calculations or apply rules to your diagrams. So if certain things come to pass, you can automate different actions in your diagram. So it becomes a living document that you can do a lot with. You can plan a business, plan your projects, and run them using MindManager. So for the project managers in the crowd, also within one topic, you can include a whole series of task information. So I'm going to open up a task pane on the right-hand side, which more or less mirrors what you see here in the diagram. It shows where and how you can enter in this information and start tracking things like priority progress. You can add one or more resources you can assign to a task, includes start date and due dates, and track duration and effort, at costs, milestones, dependencies, the 4 most common dependencies. So you have finish to start, finish to finish, start to finish, and start to start, and the ability to roll everything up. So essentially, you can use this to create a work breakdown structure or a project plan, and then roll up your tasks in the plan, and then see it in an interactive Gantt chart as well. So it's a pretty powerful planning tool for projects, and that's what I wanted to highlight there. The look and feel of these diagrams are completely customizable as well. So I can open up the Design tab and choose from any number of layouts. My personal favorite, I like to work in this format, which is a right-facing format. So it's pretty linear for me, but traditional mind mapping opts for the radial, where you can see it goes around the clock layout, or you can just click a switch and you've got tree formats or org chart formats, things like that. And then you can start to design it differently as well. With a single click, you can start to alter the whole design, or you have the ability to customize a design of your own. So those are some of your design options. And then, drum roll please, something I've been doing has been moving the diagram. So this is about panning the map, so you can view your content, you can move and reposition things on the canvas. You have the ability to zoom in and zoom out, and also look at this information beyond a few different layouts. You can look at it in different ways as well. So I can switch to a traditional outline. I can see it from a planning perspective or a schedule perspective. I can see it from a priority perspective. And all of these views are interactive. So I could drag and drop any of the content to different priorities. And when I go back to my map, I will see it all as the reprioritized layout. So the next couple key points here are some of the controls of viewing the information as well. So we include the ability to view your content as a slideshow or a walkthrough, which means a lot of the controls that you see here in the application would be hidden. So your audience would only see the content and focus on the content, not all the controls. You could step through your diagrams one branch at a time, and they're fully interactive in these modes. So if you're in a meeting and a presentation, you can engage the audience, you can move things around, you can add feedback or change priorities in the middle of a presentation. So that's a powerful way to present using these diagrams. And we can focus on topics. So this example here is if your map is all over the place, all over the map, literally, and you hit F3, it will automatically recenter the diagram, close all the other branches, and focus the attention or the cursor on the spot where you hit F3. You can also show a single branch and dive in and see that branch alone, and also bring back the rest of the map. So this is just a taste of some of the capabilities that you have from a mind mapping perspective. I'm going to dive back into the presentation and cover reverse brainstorming.
That's great, Michael. At the beginning, you were telling us you were going to have two key techniques. It'll be the mind mapping and the reverse brainstorming combined, right, for the future proofing.
Yes, absolutely. So
awesome.
The next technique, the next technique is reverse brainstorming. So everyone's probably familiar with brainstorming, a traditional way to generate ideas. This reverse brainstorming flips that around. So it's about tapping into the natural ability to see problems more easily than solutions. So a traditional brainstorming question might be, how can we ensure that a project is a rating success? The flip side of that is, how can we ensure that this project is a failure? And that might seem counterintuitive, like I said earlier. And the question is, why would we do that? Well, first, it's an easier, faster way to generate ideas. Second, it's a great technique, and we'll dive into it in a moment. It's a great technique where you can bring a cross-section of your team together and get all the different perspectives that are usually hidden that you might not see, but because we're tapping into that natural ability for them to see their problems, they can voice that more easily. And you'll be amazed at how much more, or how many more ideas are generated in a reverse brainstorming session than a regular brainstorming session. And then finally, it's a powerful way to transform a session where people are complaining into something more productive. And the secret behind that is, you first identify the problem, reverse the problem in the form of the question. So in this case, it's, how do we make the project fail? Then you brainstorm all the possibilities for failure. And this is where thinking outside the box is amazing. It could be anything, and there's lots of techniques and tools you can do to help spur on that creativity. But once you have your full brainstorm list, you can then rank, what's the probability? What's the likelihood that this is going to occur? And then what is the severity? What's the impact to the project or to the business? And once you have that, you can focus in and reverse again, and then figure out, how do we mitigate, or how do we approach this risk? So I am going to dive back into MindManager and open up another map example, which has that problem. How do we ensure project success? And then flip that around. I've done this in advance, which is, how do we ensure our project fails, and fails miserably? The next step is to start to brainstorm ideas. So I've added a few here. Key resource takes a new job. We have untrained staff. We have too few resources. We lost our budget. Requirements changed. Scope creep. So we can add and start adding additional ideas. It's as easy as clicking enter and then typing in. So it could be things like, the task was underestimated, or the task was overestimated. Things like, the data center lost power, we lost all our work. No, it could be anything, and the key is to invite all different perspectives to your brainstorming meeting. And really,
it almost sounds fun to do, actually.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's like, what could go wrong? And when you ask it that way, so much can go wrong. And often everything does, and people will bring back their experiences. Like, this went wrong in the past. Let's remember not to make that mistake again. And that's where it becomes a powerful process. So I've included some icons up here, which you can see, and they indicate whether something's a low impact or a medium impact, or something that could be, negatively very impactful on the project, as well as something that has a low probability or a high probability. And if you click in, you can move around to something that's medium. So this is part of the process. We've identified the problem, which was step 1. We've reversed it, which was step 2. We've gone through some of the brainstorming, which would be step 3. Step 4 is to start to categorize or assess, how bad is this risk or obstacle or threat. And then step 4 is to start to flip it around and decide, what are we going to do about it? So I've included another branch down here for different approaches to handling risk. So you might have risks that are low probability and low impact. And you might say, hey, if something that's a low impact, low probability, so this one, we're just going to accept that risk. And you can start to go through this. There are some risks you might want to reduce because, they might happen, and it would be pretty bad if it does happen. So you might find some things here, and we could just drag and drop a few examples, nothing. And then move on and say, there's risks we might want to transfer. And in this case, it means something like, we don't want to own that risk. So insurance is a good example of transferring a risk. If you pay for insurance, something bad happens, you've mitigated it, you get something back. We know that for life insurance, for health insurance, car insurance, things like that. There's insurance for business as well, or things like outsourcing could be considered a type of transference. And things we might want to avoid altogether. And that's the high risk, high probability. So that's where we're going to put a lot of our effort. So you could drag something here to avoid, and then I'm just picking things randomly, but then you can start to detail out, how are we going to deal with staff training, for instance? Or what are going to be our hiring plans or outsourcing plans? How are we going to make sure that we have enough staff to run the project? So that was a really accelerated view of how you combine all of these techniques together. The mind mapping, getting things out of your head, whether it's your head or your team's, and the reverse brainstorming, how do you flip a problem on its end and start to open up the floodgates to create new ideas and start to assess, analyze, and then create action plans to mitigate your risks. So now I could take a breath and ask Julie, do we have questions that we want to cover?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Questions have been coming in as we've been you've been showing some live demos, a variety of them. We have one here that I can throw your way while you take a little sip of water. It is from Guillermo, and he says, how is reverse brainstorming different than traditional risk analysis?
That's a good question. And off the top of my head, I just can't even answer that at the moment. Yeah, I don't have an answer, Cameron.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I would say probably maybe just the fluidity of inviting people into a brainstorming session and allow them to just throw out anything that comes to mind. But it's a good question.
Yeah, and not being as familiar with traditional risk analysis or what you consider traditional risk analysis, it would be complementary to it in any type of risk analysis, because you would insert this type of brainstorming in that place where you're identifying the potential risks. So if you have a process or that you're working with and you're just drawing on past experiences to identify risks or brainstorming, this is another tool for your tool belt, and one that I've had success with in terms of identifying potential gaps or roadblocks or things that might be coming down the road
I think also, project leaders end up, finding what works best for them. But I guess it all depends too on who your audience is, what you know about them, and how they like to work. We have another question here from Thomas, and it's an interesting one. It's talking about some of the team dynamics. It says, how do we get team buy-in to this new technique when they're just really anxious to go and do the work?
Which technique? Mind mapping or reverse brainstorming or both? It's interesting. I found with mapping, create a map with the team. So just from the get-go, you can organize a session where you're building out a project charter and you're drawing input in from a variety of resources. And it's a very interactive process when you're all building a map together. And some of the magic that happens when you do it collaboratively is team members tend to have buy-in and ownership because their voice tends to be heard and they can witness it being heard immediately because of the interactive process of creating a map. What I've found is when you're working together in a team, a lot of times it creates a lot of discussion, argument in a good way, constructive conversation saying like, no, that's not what I meant. You got to put it here or move it there. And everyone's like getting engaged, which is what you want out of that process. So I could see the reverse brainstorming being an effective way as well to get participation and buy-in. But if people are disinterested, they're also disinterested. If they want to just do the work, the payoff for planning as a project manager is huge. And there are going to be members of the team that have a vested interest in seeing the positive outcomes. They're going to be the ones that you want to tap into, I guess. That's my take on that answer, impromptu.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I know we're just putting you on the spot here. Here's another one. It is around lessons learned. Michael asks, is there a way in project management to capture delays for lessons learned, etc.?
Can you repeat the question one time?
Yeah, so I think the question is, say you have a delay in your project, is there a way to capture that as the project is still moving forward so that you can then keep it in a lessons learned?
Well, things I've done in the past, I have a few different dashboard maps that I collect information in. So if I'm running a project, for instance, I've used maps to organize the software releases within MindManager and to keep track of the projects as they're coming to pass. So I've accumulated notes in those master dashboards. If there are delays, what the reason was, what the date was, and I add that to my dashboard. And that can become my status report that I use for communication with other executives. I can then feed that into lessons learned, things like that. I also have a map. This is a little bit different, but this is from a manager's perspective. I used to keep a map for each team member on the team. And then I would, because I want to grow resources, I would keep a record of opportunities for lessons or lessons learned, growth opportunities, or things that I wanted to talk to a resource about. So I was constantly using maps to record ideas or thoughts or progress along the way. And then I would reference those maps or the captured thoughts and move them into a meeting that I was going to have with a resource, or possibly the lessons learned meeting I had at the end of a project when we were going through our project closure process and we were going to do a retrospective. I would have notes from the whole project and say, oh yeah, this went wrong, this went wrong, this went wrong, this went right, this was great. And I would have my thoughts so I wouldn't have to, at the end of the day, think of it from scratch where I might have forgotten all of that stuff. So the thing with mapping is there's probably a million different ways to do it. And that's why I had the advice earlier, which is find the way that works for you. I could show you how I've done it in the past, but you may come up with a way that really works for you. So I encourage people to play with it and find that the secret sauce, the best way to capture that information.
Yeah, I like that idea, Michael. I think
So, okay.
I think of quite a few of us probably do that, where we sort of just keep a map of ideas just running and open on our desktop. And then I suppose another way to do it is you could have it right in your project map as like a parking lot or lessons learned. You can just drop those items in there as the project keeps moving forward.
Yeah, I had but when I left Corel, the full-time role, I was managing 2 different product teams in 2 different companies. And I had a master map that had all the different projects in it that linked to individual project maps, that linked to additional maps and related information. So I had a whole network of information. And I was able to do all that and not stress out or completely lose my mind, because I had my mind in the document. So it was easier for me because I didn't have to worry about things. I had a dashboard that I could always go to, and within a few clicks, I would have all the important documents. I'd have all the plans, all the notes, and I could find the things I needed very fast, typically. So it became a very useful process.
Yeah, it looks like Mary on the call, she was thinking the exact same thing as me, having sort of a parking lot function so that, in flight you can drop these sorts of ideas that come to you. We have another question from Joy, and it says, our PMs are also VPs and directors of other departments. With respect to their time, in your experience, how long should a mind mapping meeting be held? And would you suggest holding multiple meetings?
I guess that it depends. If we're talking about the reverse brainstorming session, I would say as quick as you can do it. The key here is you're trying to generate, in any brainstorming session, you're trying to generate as many ideas as you can, and then you can step back and rank and qualify those ideas, which ones are real threats, which ones aren't. If you're exhausted everything, there's no reason to keep the meeting going. If you find you've run out of time and everything's still flowing, you may call another meeting. It really just depends on what industry you're in, what project you're running, what's the importance of that project, how many people are in the meeting. There's a lot of variables, I guess, is what I'm getting at. So it's hard to say. My recommendation, if you're adopting this technique, is or want to play with it and try it, I encourage you to do a trial and start to play with it and get some experience. Make a map of your own, do some brainstorming on your own, and then you'll get the comfort and the legs behind you so that you can actually introduce this to others. And start small. Give it a test try. Do it with people, though. Invite them in, and once you have that comfort, invite them into the process and go, hey, let's play. Let's brainstorm some stuff together. I've got this project that's going on, and I want to bulletproof the project and make sure it doesn't fail. There were a few ideas I thought, these are the things that could go wrong, but what else? What else can go wrong? What else might, get this project? And see where it goes. And as people are sharing their ideas, you capture it. It's great if you project it on the wall, or if you're doing it with, like we're doing now, with a webinar kind of thing, or GoToMeeting or Zoom, and engage everyone and make sure you use those processes, like asking everyone for, what do you think? What else? Anything else? Or Julie and I were talking about improv earlier, and we were saying, yes, and what else? Instead of saying no, or you're always, you're always encouraging, encouraging more.
On this same
Speaking
topic,
of more,
Michael.
are there more questions?
Oh yeah, sorry, Michael. Didn't mean to interrupt you. I think we've got a slight delay in our audio between our countries. We have lots of other questions. So one of the other questions that's come in along this line, kind of add on to Joy's question about how long it takes. David was saying, well, it depends on the project, and sometimes it could take 1 hour, other times it could take weeks. And that reminds me of a lot of the material I'm seeing about remote working that focuses on asynchronous communications. So I suppose you could have a live synchronous session doing the brainstorming, and then you could allow people to consult the map over the week. If any other ideas came to them, they could add them in then. But in terms of having something synchronous, can other people edit at the same time is a question that's come in. They're saying, can I invite others to edit with me?
The answer is yes, you can. And there are quite a few packages like like Google Docs or things like that, or now the Office applications have caught up that allow co-editing to take place. You can do that in diagrams with MindManager as well.
Great. So for those on the call who are really here for the high level topics of the reverse brainstorming and the mind mapping, we've covered all of those questions right now, but since we have a little bit of time still left, and I know Michael, he's very familiar with the product, we have a couple of deep dive product questions, if you don't mind me getting into those, Michael.
Sure, you might. It is 11:15 p.m. here, but go ahead.
So how awake are you, right? Someone was asking about showing relationships between items in a map. I'm going to see if I can find the question.
Okay. Well, it is possible. There are a few ways that you can relate topics together in a diagram like this. You can. There's a feature in MindManager called relationships, and you can click a couple of topics, click the feature, and it draws the relationship line between those disparate topics. That's one way. You can also copy a topic as a hyperlink, and you can paste that hyperlink into another topic. So you can build links from one topic to another, so you can jump around your diagram with these hyperlinks. And you can even jump, this is when I talk about dashboards of maps linked together. I could jump and link one map to another map even. So I can have a program of maybe 10 projects. I can have summaries of those 10 projects and link to each specific project map or project dashboard that I keep. So there are a few different ways you can link topics together.
Okay, great. Terry has asked, can the information from your reverse brainstorming session be exported or imported into other softwares like Word or Excel, etc.?
Yes, the answer is a definite yes. You have the ability to import from like Excel-like documents, I think CSV files, Word. You can cut and paste from browsers, and cut and paste from most any applications. And from an exporting, and there's probably a few more imports off the top of my mind. I'm drawing a blank there. From an export perspective, you can import or export to Word, Project, and you can import from Project as well. Word, Project, PowerPoint, you can export to, and a few others as well, Excel. And yes, I don't have MindManager open. I have the closing slide open. So that's why I'm just doing it from memory.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, you can virtually export or import into anything. I mean, our integrations are very strong. And of course, there's also Zapier. If there is something specific that you were looking with, we have that partnership with them. Let me see what we've got going. I have a comment here, not a question. It says, no question, mind maps are awesome. I've shown them to some who are resistant on seeing a mind map, then quickly turned into big advocates of them because they simply didn't know how useful they were.
Yeah. It's interesting. If you show someone your completed mind map, it could be your opus and all of your genius, but it can also overwhelm someone who's not familiar with it. And that's why I encouraged earlier, create a mind map with someone so that they can also have that cathartic experience of seeing their thoughts come to life. And that's the way you can start sharing this with other people. So it's very different if I just put a map in front of someone and say, go have it, go have at it, because it's really a visual representation. Yeah, it's a visual representation of our mind, and all of our minds are completely unique in terms of our past work experience, our life experience, everything we've read, everything we've seen, the movies and TV and everything. And that's how we think. Like we've formed our minds growing up, and then we create a diagram of it. That doesn't mean someone's immediately going to understand it. But if you co-create the diagram, there's been no other way in my career in 30 years of working with others and collaborating that I've seen so much buy-in around projects and plans and moving forward, because they've participated in that creation process. So you're embedding in them a sense of ownership in that plan, more so than throwing up other types of documents like a PowerPoint deck or a Word document and having people read through it. It doesn't feel as collaborative. It feels more of like a broadcast of information. So, and today I broadcasted information. This isn't collaborative what we're doing here, but when you're mapping together with your team, yeah, that becomes a very collaborative process, and you'll see the alignment actually taking place and people starting to own the project a little bit more deeply.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's a great point to finish on, Michael. I think this concept of ownership is so critical to change management and getting people to be able to embrace change and feel a bit more resilient and confident about change. So I want to take this time to really thank you for going through not only the concepts of mind mapping and reverse brainstorming, but doing some live demo and answering all of these questions on the spot. It's really been great. For anybody else who's still on the call and I haven't been able to answer a product specific question, you can email me directly and I'll make sure you get an answer. My name is Julie, Julie Harrison, Harrison, at Corel.com. Feel free to email me any of your questions and I'll make sure that you get an answer. So thank you everyone for joining us today. You've given us a lot of your time. And once again, thanks, Michael. It's really nice being able to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Everyone stay safe and take care.
Yes, take care. Bye now, everyone.